I'm Italian, so growing up we ate lots of pasta, and strangers were always screaming at me, "Anthony." It's a commercial from 90s, if you remember, you remember, if you don't, whatever. But that means I love making pasta. So let's get to making some ravioli, shall we? Okay, for our first filling, we are going with butternut squash because it is in season and makes a delicious ravioli. I like to cut it into two, cutting the fat end from the thinner end and then cutting those in half, making sure to get rid of these stems. Once you have these in half, core this part to get rid of all those seeds. You can save them if you'd like, but we are going to quarter these to make them cook even quicker, and then once they are cut down to this size, we will separate just one of these for now, and you will see why in a moment, but the rest of these are going onto a sheet pan for baking. Drizzle them with a little bit of oil and season them with salt and pepper, and then we're going to throw these in an oven 375 to 400 degrees for about 45 minutes to an hour until they are tender. Now this other piece, if you remember that we just separated, we're going to do something a little bit differently with, so I'm going to skin it with my knife. Just be careful doing that. You could also use a peeler if that's easier for you, and then cutting them down into planks and then strips, and then we're going to get a nice dice on these. Don't have to go too small because they will really shrink when cooking. And after about 15 to 20 minutes at the same temperature, after being seasoned with the same oil, salt, and pepper, these will roast up very nicely and you will have some nice caramelized roasted butternut squash. But let's take these a step further. While they're still warm, we'll get them in a bowl with some cinnamon and some nutmeg, about a teaspoon each, and then we'll throw in about a tablespoon of brown sugar, and this is just going to give it some really nice flavor, but also kind of give it a candied effect, so it'll be really nice and roasted, a little bit sweet, and this is going to be a garnish. Back to our regular squash. Once it is done and fork tender, we will pull these out and just use a fork to kind of get it out, or you can use your hands, whatever's easiest for you. But you'll be left with this kind of stringy squash in the bowl, but it is cooked through. We'll just kind of mash that down. Similarly, season that with some cinnamon and some nutmeg and mash it in there as well. Taste it if you're not sure how much to put it in. If it tastes good, you're good. If it needs more, keep going. Now, life is full of choices. This is nice and rustic. It tastes good, and this would make a great filling, but I want it smoother, so I throw it in a blender just for about 30 seconds with just a drop of olive oil, and it just gets this really smooth puree. I just prefer it like this, but go with whatever way you like. A little bit more cinnamon, nutmeg, salt and pepper to taste, and now I have this perfectly smooth puree. Again, choices. I love it cheesy, so I'm going to go with a nice fat couple tablespoons of Parmesan cheese for a nice salty cheesy bite, and ricotta. I love ricotta. It's just so classic in ravioli. It's creamy, it's cheesy, and this makes us a perfect butternut squash ravioli filling. So we're going to throw this in the fridge for the time being, and let's talk pasta. So I'm going to grab 2 cups of all-purpose flour, to which I'm going to add 3 whole eggs and a drizzle of olive oil. No salt for now, which we'll talk about later, but I will just grab a fork and just beat it in the middle of this well, slowly incorporating more and more flour into it with my fork. You'll see it really thicken up once it kind of gets more like this, like a thicker dough kind of thing, because we are making a dough, of course. You can ditch the fork and use your hands and just kind of knead it on your surface. This is 2 cups of flour again, so this is going to make about a pound of pasta, so about 10 minutes of kneading it, you'll have a nice smooth dough ball just like this. Throw it in the fridge for about 20 minutes to a half hour, either plastic wrap or a container like this. I'm going to cut mine in half, flour my work surface generously. First, just use my hand to kind of flatten out, then bring in the big guns with the rolling pin, going back and forth to get it nice and smooth and flatten out a little bit. Then we want to laminate our dough, right? Laminating just means folding it over and then kind of repeating the process, just pressing it out and doing that over and over again. We're developing gluten, we're making the pasta stronger. After you do that about 2 to 3 times, you can just roll it out until you have something nice and flat like this. I like to take a pizza cutter and just kind of get rid of the edges. Since we're making ravioli, it's easier to work with a cleaner rectangular oval shape. Then I will fold this in half to see exactly where to cut for 2 equal portions, and then you could just use this and fold it over. I'm gonna make these really small, so I'm just gonna cut this in half one more time for a nice thin strip, and there you have the base of our bottom ravioli. So now we will grab our filling and just taking a spoon, again because I'm going smaller, I'm gonna just do some small dollops here, giving enough space in between to put the top layer on, and I'm going with an egg wash, which is obviously just an egg, just beaten a little bit with a fork. Then I will use a brush just to spread a very thin layer in between. This will just help the top stick to the bottom. With fresh pasta, you may not need this because it's kind of naturally a little bit more sticky, but I'm just playing it safe. Then I will put the top layer on top, applying some pressure so you really know exactly where to cut, and you can see the filling versus where the excess dough is. And again, I will just take a pizza slicer because I find it super easy to just cut the pasta into the shape that I want, getting rid of the excess and cutting them into individual pieces. And now I want circles, or these cool little oval shapes. So again, I'll just take each one and kind of cut off the ends to make a nice cool ovally circle moon looking thing. And there you go. These are our butternut squash ravioli. The exact shape that I want, the exact size that I want. And again, you can get creative and do this however you want. Speaking of which, let's go with our second filling. So we'll get a pan with some olive oil and about a quarter of a diced onion. We'll throw in a couple of fat tablespoons of garlic, saute this down, and I'm using turkey. You could use beef or whatever kind of meat mix you want, but I'm going to season it with salt and pepper and a lot of Italian herbs. Make some space in the pan for for this because we just want to brown this off really nicely, so make sure there's plenty of space so you're not, sweating the meat and you're actually browning it. And I like to just break it up to make sure it's in really small pieces. We're going to put this into our ravioli, obviously, so we don't want huge pieces. Then once it's cool, I'll get into a bowl with some Parmesan cheese and some olive oil. Give it a taste. All that onion, garlic, and seasoning is already making it really nice. So I'm going to throw in just 1 egg just to kind of help it bind and stick together. Normally you want ravioli filling really loose, but this will just help us form our balls. Now for a very quick tomato sauce. Olive oil, onion, garlic, let that saute for a few minutes. Add some really good quality canned tomatoes. Throw in whatever herbs you have. I have some basil and some dried oregano, and I'm going to cover that and just let that simmer over medium heat for as long as you can go, a good 20 to 30 minutes at least, but the longer you go, the better it's going to taste. Now here was the other half of our pasta. Again, I did this by hand. Obviously, if you have a machine, it is super easy, but we will cut this down into wider strips this time, form our balls, leaving space in between, hitting it with the egg wash to make sure that it can stick together. Put your top layer on and then add some pressure as well to just really make a nice seal and show exactly where the meat is. Then I love this trick. I want squares this time, so I'm going to just take a fork and simply crimp it. Not only is that sealing it, but it also gives it a really nice cool look. Then our pizza slicer to get rid of the excess dough on each side. Save this for later. You can make some great little pasta out of this. Then I just take my roller to cut them individually, and then I will take the fork to crimp the insides. The outsides are already crimped, and these are really cool. You have these cool little meat purses. They have the perfect ravioli shape and that really cool outline to it. And there you go. We made 2 different kinds of ravioli. You can get creative, any shape, any filling, anything you want. And these fellas are ready to cook, so let's get some boiling water going, and we're going to season this with tons of salt because we didn't season the pasta. We're just going to season the actual cooking water, bring it up to a nice boil. Fresh pasta cooks super quick, about a minute or so depending on how you like it, because we're also going to finish cooking it in the pan, so it really won't take long at all. You may want to do this part first because it will take longer. We'll get a pan with some pine nuts. Toasting pine nuts gives it an excellent smell and a really, really great flavor. Goes perfectly with this. Once they're toasted, remove them from the pan, making a brown butter sauce, so butter or butter substitute, big fat, couple heaping teaspoons, some garlic in there. We have a nice garlic butter going. We want to get this nice and frothy and a little bit brown. We're going to add in some sage leaf. Raw sage is kind of like suede. It's like soft and it has a weird texture to it, and it doesn't taste good raw, but if you fry it up in a little bit of oil or butter, it just has such an awesome crispness and it goes perfectly with this. Now remember our candied butternut squash, we're going to get that in there, and you can see everything is really browning up nicely. So let's get our pine nuts back in the pan, and now we can take our ravioli straight from the water, adding a little bit of the cooking water as well for that nice starchiness. We're going to finish this in the pan, give everything a really nice toss, and because of that rich butteriness, I like to take a little bit of acidity. You can use a little bit of white wine or some fresh lemon and just squeeze it over top. Finish it with a ton of Parmesan cheese, and these bad boys are ready to go. Now for our other ravioli, even easier, again getting them into the boiling salted water, heating up our tomato sauce on the side. As soon as they are cooked through, about a minute or so, let's get them into the sauce to finish cooking, not overcrowding, giving them all a nice good toss to make sure that they're all soaking up that sauce. And we're going to throw a ton of Parmesan cheese over top, and now these are ready to go. Everybody's happy, everybody's looking good, everybody's feeling fine. Raviolis, 2 completely different ways, completely different shapes, completely different fillings, but you can see how you can kind of just make a big batch of dough and then stuff them with whatever you like. To me, this is more of a classic ravioli, both in shape, filling, and sauce. I went with ground turkey, but you could use the beef, and it's basically like a meatball within a ravioli. Super soft, super tender. You can use your fork, and you can see that it's loaded with that really nice, let's call it a meatball stuffing, and these will disappear very quickly. Let's reload with our butternut squash ravioli. You could do this exact same recipe with pumpkin if you want to make a pumpkin ravioli. Same flavors will all work really well, and you can see that the filling is just oozing out of it. Cheese is making it so creamy and cheesy, but the butternut still shines through the most. I mean, the fried sage, the candied butternut on the outside, the nuts, everything just goes together so perfectly. You're gonna have empty plates in no time. Fair warning, if you make these homemade raviolis for people around the holidays, good luck getting them to leave your house.